The Pike River explosion and the decision to not prosecute the mine's former CEO, Peter Whitall, is to head to the Supreme Court. This follows the Court of Appeal's decision in February to dismiss a challenge by Anna Osborne and Sonya Rockhouse over a $3.4 million payout to the families of mine victims. The appeal effectively portrayed the money as Peter Whitall buying his way out of prosecution. The appeal court rejected that, saying the payout was voluntary. Whitall had initially faced 12 health and safety charges. Now Nigel Hampton QC says the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the women's claim that that payout was effectively unlawful.
The one point that we are now taking to the court is, was the Court of Appeal wrong in saying that this was just a voluntary payment on the side, or are we correct in the argument for Anna and Sonya that this was indeed a bargain between Mr. Whitall on the one hand and WorkSafe on the other, and was it an unlawful bargain because part of the bargain was payment of $3.41 million, which in effect was to make the prosecution go away. We say that was a stifling and unlawful agreement, and that's the issue.
Nigel Hampton QC will speak to Nigel Hampton at length later in the program. Meanwhile, Pike family members are saying newly released footage taken inside the mine 6 years ago shows strikingly little fire damage, contradicting assertions that the damage was so great bodies would have been burned beyond recognition and even retrieval. Neville Rockhouse, who worked in the mine with his two sons, one of whom, Ben, was among the 29 men killed, is backing other Pike families and insisting the footage was never shown to the Royal Commission into the tragedy.
No, it wasn't. No. I sat through the whole Royal Commission as well, and no, I never saw it, and I haven't seen it in any of the film that's been released. I believe that you can see in that clip there's, from what I've heard, there's a body as well, which makes sense. The body wouldn't be far away from his glasses.
Would Ben have been in the area of Borehole 44 at the time, do you think?
Yes, he was. That was his workplace. That's where he was working at the time. They'd had difficulty with water in the morning, and that's why he stayed back. He was supposed to be at my place for tea at 5:30 p.m, but because they didn't have water in the mine in the morning, him and Josh stayed back. Once they got water reticulating again, they stayed back to do extra work to catch up. And yeah, unfortunately, he never made it.
Neville, this is a very difficult question, and I apologise for asking it because I know how tough this is for you, but do you believe they are Ben's glasses, and if there's a body nearby, do you believe that's Ben? Yes,
I do. Yeah, they and apparently in that same clip there is a shape that needs to be enhanced, but it looks like Ben wouldn't, if his glasses got knocked off his face during an explosion, and if he was conscious, he would have put them back on his nose because he's blind as a bat without them. And yeah, he's nearby. I'm certain of that.
What does the condition of that wood crate, which seems on the face of it to have no burn scars of any sort, tell you about that area around Borehole 44?
Well, it brings into question the entire story that was fed to us over a long period of time, including the mines rescue person who came forward after 6 years of silence, saying that they were down there retrieving and salvaging robots in and out of the mine. You know, at the time we were told this thing will be sealed up, everyone's burnt beyond recognition, there'll only be bone fragments left, this, you know, it's done and dusted, there's no coming back, it's going to be sealed forever. And within 3 months you've got mines rescue personnel going down there rescuing robots for salvage money. But yeah, and not going on up the drift to have a look, see if there's any loved ones or bodies remains up there. And in the area where Ben is, you know, that area, pallets of wood, even the radiant heat would sort of char it. But no burn damage at all, John.
Neville, can you be as explicit as possible with me about the kind of language that was used to describe the condition the bodies were in? What were you told?
We were told that the majority of the remains would have been burned beyond recognition, and the intensity of the heat would be bone fragments left only, if that, and it would have been a forensic. I had to sit through, John, having my DNA taken by a police pathologist, and my wife at the time as well, to use for identification purposes, which is a pretty traumatic sort of a situation anyway. And those that perhaps where the fire did not reach, they would be mummified, and but now apparently there's a significant amount of footage that shows bodies are in the drift. They're there, they're waiting to come home. I call upon the government and John Key to keep his government's promise that whatever it takes, irrespective of the cost, the boys will come home. Everyone deserves one attempt. They've never had an attempt. They go and rescue robots, but they don't go and rescue the men.
Neville, I've seen that telephone footage of John Key talking at that meeting that day. Can you remember what he said to you? You were there. Can you remember as well as possible what the Prime Minister at the time said to you about getting the boys out?
He said, whatever it takes, irrespective of the cost, we will bring your boys, we will bring your loved ones home to you. And that was a commitment. And we took him at his face value as the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And then after that, it's just been a political kick the can. Each successive person in charge has kicked the can further down the road for someone else to pick up. Here we are, 7 years later. Now we've got further evidence that there are bodies and remains, and no one has ever attempted to go in and recover those bodies. We've got people who have volunteered to, mine rescue experts to do the job. All they wanted was their accommodation and a bit of food and airfares, and they'd come and get the job done from Australia. So, it's beyond belief. It's just dreadful. It's not a good look.
Neville Rockhouse talking to us earlier. Nigel Hampton will join us on Checkpoint to talk about the Supreme Court action later in the program.